Welcome, everybody, to Crossing the Line, where each week we dig into the latest news on the economy, housing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Today is December 4th. It's not a bad day here in New York City, especially after all the rain we had this weekend. And it's our 5th episode, which we're very proud of. We haven't been canceled yet. That's great. I'm Greg Heym, Chief Economist at Brown Harris Stevens. Hopefully you already knew that. And author of The Line, a weekly economics blog, which is sort of the foundation for this show, allows us to get into stuff a little more detailed. As always, we're coming to you from our home here at Studio 1873 at 445 Park Avenue. Again, conveniently located right outside my office and around the corner from marketing for Hannah. So
yes.
She has to walk a little bit further than me, but we'll...
Just a tad, but not much.
Yes, well, she's just a little bit younger than me, so that, she can walk the legs. Our goal, as always, is to be informative, concise, entertaining, and edgy all at the same time. We're lucky if we can do one of those a week. I don't know why we shoot, but right, if you're going to dream big. We'll see if we can pull that off. Just a reminder before we get into it that we've set up this email address. We're not really getting email, so don't be afraid to hurt Hannah's feelings by sending negative comments,
I mean, don't be afraid, but I'd like people to feel a little bad. You hurt my feelings.
No, I'm the one that's going to get all the hate mail here. That's clear. Again, that's CTL at bhsusa.com. CTL at bhsusa.com. So how was everybody's weekend? Hannah? By the way, we have Hannah, our co-pilot every week, and we have Ray, who's really the glue that keeps the show together. He glues all the video together and the audio.
Yeah.
So your weekend good?
Good weekend. We had a good win yesterday. Rangers are just really making us proud, aren't they?
Yeah, I'd like to get excited about beating the Sharks, but
I'll take anything.
When you do it by barely a goal, it seems, yeah. But it's good to see Panarin lighten it up. So they are the best team in the NHL, and
yes.
I don't have to mention that other team, at all. Ray, how was the weekend? Good?
Pretty good.
All right. So I did two really cool things this weekend. Sorry to indulge myself. You remember last week I was talking about how I went to see a recreation of the concert for Bangladesh?
Yes.
Well, this past weekend I went and saw a recreation of The Last Waltz.
Wow.
The band's farewell concert out in the beautiful Patchogue Theater. A bit of a hike for me. But just an unbelievable show, especially the guy that played bass sounded just like Rick Danko. The music was tight. The horn section was great. And the people they got to play Van Morrison, the guy they got to do Ronnie Hawkins was phenomenal. If remember that scene, he does Who Do You Love? And he's like joking through the whole thing. This guy is obviously an Elvis impersonator that they got in his spare time because he had the sideburns and everything and the charisma. It was phenomenal. And they knew not to do the Neil Diamond song. So that was good because nobody likes that
You
song.
good seats?
Second row, actually.
Pretty good.
It was a really good time. Love the music. The funny thing is that to me, they're almost like the best band that does American music, but they're virtually all Canadian. Robbie Robertson, all of them except Lee Von Helm were Canadian. And it's ironic, the oldest one is the only one still alive. Garth Hudson is still alive. All the others, unfortunately, have passed. But they wrote some great songs, and my wife was not as familiar with the band's catalog, but just loved the show, loved the music.
Sounds like a good time.
It was phenomenal. Now, I don't know what recreation of a concert I'm going to see this weekend. I have a gig, so I can't really go out.
Your weekends are jam-packed.
Yeah, well, I got to do something.
Actually jam, like no pun intended.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's all about music, when I'm not doing economics. The other thing is I was watching yesterday a documentary called Thriller 40. Michael Jackson's Thriller is 40. I was mesmerized. I love a good documentary, particularly if it's about music. I was mesmerized. I had no idea that Michael Jackson was that driven and, had that big of an ego.
Yeah, he was quite obsessive.
You know what? That's usually...
But, that's how you are with a craft, when you're a musician, most likely.
Well, or a wannabe musician is me. I feel that way about my economics, but with my music, not so much. But the thing that really... It's amazing how many things could have gone wrong during this process and the big step he was taking, because it's not an R&B album. It's not a dance album. It has elements of pop. You have the duet with McCartney. It's funny he does a duet with Paul McCartney, and most people consider it one of the worst songs on the album. It was the first single, and they're talking about how disappointing it was. It went to number 2 on the charts. But then you have a great rock song like Beat It. And then, and Wanna Be Starting Something. I love the guitar work on there. And it's like, that's not enough. He has to show how great he is. He'll write a horror song, that you can dance to. And actually puts you in a good mood when you hear it. You're not scared.
Yeah,
it's not like putting Slayer on where you'd be like frightened.
Yeah.
This is just like so. And, he writes so many of these songs. And I'm not aware of him. I've read online that he plays a little bit of keyboards, but the demo of Beat It, he's actually singing everything.
I mean, he just did a little bit of everything. Do you, are you of course you are. I mean, why am I even asking? But are you familiar with the, just like the supergroup song, We Are the World, which was...
Yes, I do remember it.
My favorite part is when he shows up and just blows everyone out of the water effortlessly.
He co-wrote it, I believe, Lionel Richie. And,
they're great.
And Stevie Wonder maybe. But look, the guy, not only does he do it all by himself, writing most of the songs, but he can dance better than anybody. I mean,
that's for sure.
Just an amazing. Here's a trivia question, and then we'll get on to the economic stuff. He's one of 3 people to sell 100 million albums as a solo artist and as a member of a band. People forget, the Jackson 5 was incredibly successful. Who are the other 2 people that have sold 1 million records as a solo act and as part of a band? One of them I think is incredibly obvious. The other one, Paul McCartney is one of them.
Right.
I'll give you one hint, and then we'll.
Okay.
He owned the 80s. You could not go anywhere in the 80s without here. No. That's a duo.
Is it George Michael?
No. That's not a bad guess.
Is it Bon Jovi?
No.
Oh.
Bon Jovi's only been Bon Jovi. All right, it's Phil Collins.
Oh,
he was so omnipotent in the 80s, you couldn't avoid him if you tried. All right,
really
so
sad. I wish I got that.
Well, it's okay. It's great that he's a drummer too, because they're often overlooked. I make fun of drummers, so I'm part of the guilty. We're guitar players. We have egos about these things, right? All right, so let's get on to the economics, because that's the fun part about this show, right?
You're absolutely right, Greg.
Well, thank you, Jessica Chastain, for the... That's actually Jessica Chastain's voice. I'm not calling Lena Jessica Chastain. I'm not that confused, although it's early Monday morning. So the Fed's favorite measure of inflation up 0.2% in October. So you probably have 2 questions. Is that good news? And what is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation? Well, Ray, it's called the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or to his or her friends, Core PCE. It was up 0.2% last month, which was as expected, and up 3.5% year over year, which was also expected and good. Remember that anytime we throw core in front of an economic statistic, it means we're excluding food and energy prices because they're volatile. They go up and down really quick. So we worry more about the core inflation because that's stickier. It's going to stay around a while. Think of things like housing in particular. So why does the Fed like the PCE, core PCE, when the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, gets all of the attention and love? Well, outside that being a lot of initials, the CPI really looks at what the cost of things are, what the price is, Consumer Price Index, right? So it's tracking what's happening in the prices of the things we buy, but it's not keeping track of how much of that stuff we buy. Whereas the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Index is looking at what Hannah actually spends. And
Don't look at what I actually spend.
No, we're going to look at it. We're going to next week we'll have your bank statements.
Too many shoes.
Don't worry, I'm an economist with an MBA. I won't be judgmental. That's exactly what I'm. No.
Sure.
If you're not spending any of it on me, I'm going to be upset. So the PCE measures actual spending, so it allows that data accounts for changes in behavior. For example, the price of beef is going up dramatically. People may eat more chicken and eat less beef. So it doesn't necessarily impact their spending as much as you would think by looking at the price changes. So, and also the core PCE is a lot less volatile. Think about it when we talk about housing prices. We always have the average price and the median price. People tend to favor the median price because it's not as volatile, where the average price, particularly here in Manhattan, can be grossly influenced by $200 million sales and things like that. So anyway, if you're still awake out there, the bottom line is We're still a bit away from the Fed's 2% annual target for this number, sitting 1.5% above it, but we're moving in the right direction, and that's the key thing, and that's good news for mortgage rates. So we're happy about that. The next one we titled in the blog, "Consumers are more confident, sort of." And I said, well, why do you got to ruin that, Greg? Well, the only reason consumer confidence was up in November was because October's index was revised down. If it had stayed where it was, it would have been down. 2/3 of the people surveyed believe a recession is, quote, somewhat, or, quote again, very likely to occur over the next 12 months. There's an expression that we don't just use in economics of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people think a recession is coming and consumer spending is 2/3 of GDP, then it may just actually happen because, not because they're willing it, but because, they're believing it and they're acting like there is one. There's something called the expectations index, because just one index wouldn't be enough. Basically, they ask them about the current situation and what they expect to happen in the future. And that was 77.8. And again, you always need point of reference when you give a number. Any reading below 80, and this is just a little below 80, but any reading below 80 usually indicates a recession is coming in the next 12 months. Now, I don't think that would necessarily shock people. A lot of economists like myself thought a recession would have been happening by now. You're hiking rates at the fastest pace in decades. The inflation has been dragging on for a very long time, eroding people's purchasing power. The savings that had built up during the pandemic have dwindled down. So it wasn't that unreasonable to expect that the economy would slow down, but the consumer has proven a lot more resilient, and we've talked about this before, than what we realized. They've also amassed a record amount of credit card debt during the process. But with the weight of everything that's gone on for the last couple of years, the credit card debt at record rates, hopefully rates will move in the right direction, continue to move in the right direction. And then you have the start of repayment of student loans. It's going to be very challenging going forward. Well, you went to school, you learned something. Look at this, you're co-hosting this great podcast. Isn't this wonderful?
Yeah, that's true.
Ray, stop laughing. How could it get better? I mean, maybe if we had drinks during the thing, but
just anything with student loan, student debt, just those two words together just doesn't sit right with me, and it makes me anxious. But hey,
well, you know what makes me anxious?
Students get together, guys. We'll pay them off. Having
a son who just took his SATs this weekend, that makes
How'd
me
he
anxious.
do?
He said he did okay, but you warn him and they don't listen.
That's true.
Better do good.
Yeah, or don't come home. Yeah, that's what the sign says. I think the challenge for him was the timing aspect, because now in school they're very liberal with timing of tests.
Are they really? That changed, I guess. Standardized testing was the worst. I did not like it at all.
Well, I don't mean standard, but in general, I think they don't have this urgency. When I was in school, it was always just rushed, like hit it running, let's get it over with. But so the most interesting finding in this consumer confidence data was the increase in confidence, if it really want to consider an increase, was totally isolated in people 55 and over. Now, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but when was the last time the oldest people were the most optimistic people in a survey?
Got a good point.
I mean, right? You're like, no, we're not commenting on this.
I'm a little shocked.
Like, is my mother more optimistic than me? No, she's not. I can tell you that.
I don't know. I've never met her. She might be.
Maybe I'll have her in one time if I could drag her. That'd be funny.
I think when it comes to the economy, many people are more optimistic than you.
Well, no, I'm truthful. I'm optimistic. Look, but there's a reason they're probably a little more optimistic, and this is, I think, something we've talked about before, that it's basically been baby boomers that have been keeping the economy going because they have a lot of cash to spend, a lot of savings built up. So I guess that's good that they're confident. Maybe they'll keep spending enough to keep the economy humming along. All right, now this was my favorite thing that we had in the line on Friday. I thought it was one of the better titles. You know, when I write these articles, sometimes you just can't get a catchy title. So you come with the boring, like, this rose X%. But this one was entitled, Money Can't Buy Paul McCartney Love, but Can It Buy You Happiness?
That did, you know, I will say, when I edited that last week, it did get a chuckle out of me.
And you did a fantastic job of editing it.
Thank you.
My grandmother always said self-praise stinks. So,
you know what?
Well, yeah, anytime we can incorporate musical themes into a story about economics or something along those lines, we're very happy about that. So Empower did release their financial happiness report. Those two words don't go together enough. 59% of Americans think, yes, money can buy happiness, including 72% of millennials and 67% of Gen Z. Now, you're technically a millennial, is it?
No.
No?
I'm Gen Z.
You're Gen Z. I thought Gen Z was the most recent one.
It is.
Okay. Because my son is Gen Z.
Right.
Okay. So it's funny that the group they don't mention here is my generation, right? Gen X, talking about my generation. I mean,
do you think that money buys happiness?
No, because
okay, I beg to differ.
Well, I think the difference is older people either have money and realize they're not happy or have just given up on the concept, I think. But I think also Gen Xers, we don't cause a lot of problems. Anytime you hear about an upset generation, they're never talking about Xers. It's always the millennials and the Gen Z.
It's like the part 2 of the lost generation, kind of, overlooked a little bit. Yeah.
We were the shut up and, be quiet generation, right? That's what we were told. So how much does this happiness cost? Well, just $1.2 million. That's how much wealth this respondent said that they needed to be happy.
Oh, wow.
Although millennials needed more. Why? I don't. They're so greedy. What is up with that? Here's an interesting thing that's going to get me in trouble, so I'll let Hannah answer this question.
Great.
Americans said they need roughly $284,000 a year to be happy. Although men said they needed $381,000 and women just $183,000. Why the $200,000 difference do you think in salaries needed? Any thoughts? Or you can pass.
Well, I don't know. I really couldn't say, maybe, no, I don't know. It depends. I mean, I think that as long as, my car is paid off, my expenses, I'm not, penny pinching and I'm able to be comfortable and not have to worry, I think the amount that I would need would just be enough to alleviate some of my financial burdens,
Yeah, see, I
not
mean,
living paycheck to paycheck.
At which, almost 2/3 of Americans do, and that's scary.
Maybe men want to flex the wealth a little bit more.
I don't look. My wife said that's because women are just more about real things than money. Maybe some men think if they have to, depending on the dynamic in a household, they have to support
right.
a stay-at-home mom and their kid. I don't know. We could guess about it all day long. Maybe men are just greedier. I have no idea. This is fascinating, though. We could have a whole podcast on this. But we want to keep doing these podcasts, so we don't want to offend anybody. Yeah. But you can.
So as of now, who's to say?
You know what? You men and ladies out there, if you want to email ctl@vhsusa.com, yes. We'll revisit this next week and kind of see, if we can come up to an answer as to why men seem so much greedier than $381,000. That's
and don't hold back.
I mean, it's just so show you that at that level, how could you ever be happy? We talked last week about six figures being, the dream of so many people. To get to the rest of the survey, 71% believe more money would solve most of their problems, certainly solve their financial problems, but your relationship problems only get made worse sometimes by money. 73% are dealing with financial stress. That's not a surprise. Even we could talk about the inflation, but at any given moment in time in the history of the world, probably about that many people have been worried about it. And this one irked me a little bit. On average, respondents plan to retire at 63. So that means 10 more years. That's it. You only have 10 more years of this podcast before I retire. Actually, I'm turning 54 in February. So 9 more years. And then, thanks. Let's hope I make it.
You made it.
What was that, Ray?
We'll We'll get it right by then.
We'll get it right, and then I'll retire. It'll be great. We should have a lot of short timers have a days to retirement countdown clock. We're going to have a years to retirement.
Nice.
It's hard to. In the old days, you could plan when you were going to retire because you had a pension, right? You knew that you were going to collect it at a certain age.
I hope I don't know. I feel like, maybe I want to retire, but I just think I want to keep going until the end.
I think.
I don't like to be stagnant. I think I'll keep going.
Right. I saw what not being able to work anymore did to my dad. And, my mother said she was going to retire. I said to her, what are you going to do all day? That's 8 hours of your day that's not filled. And I think that's why it's very important to have a passion outside of work, something you could really do, whether it's volunteering.
Why you shred.
That's why I try to shred. The physical ailments, I am pathetic. I make fun of my guitar teacher all the time. I think we're going to have him on a future podcast. I think it'll be really funny. He's has a million ailments, but he's significantly older than me. For me, between my thumb and my shoulder and other problems, I don't even know if I could play guitar. I may quit playing guitar before I quit doing this podcast because apparently my mouth still works pretty well.
You can always turn to the accordion.
Me and two of my brothers have varying degrees of musical talent. And the only person we could find in either side of the family that played anything was my grandfather, my dad's father, had an accordion.
Wow.
Well, you're German. You got to do the beer barrel polka stuff. And,
what are you doing? I mean, get on. That's awesome.
I was only 3 when my grandfather passed. Everybody said he was a really fun guy. That's where all the musical talent comes from.
Nice.
That's the economics headlines. Now, it's funny because a lot of people reached out to me, friends and that read and watch the blog, and hey, everybody watching, that they prefer the second half of the show. We talked about music a lot, but that means maybe people have endured the first 20 minutes of this so they can get to the good stuff. Unfortunately, it's really all still economics related, but there will be a crossover to this at some points because of the topics.
Welcome to the second portion of the podcast.
Now, have you titled? I just write in my notes like Hannah's stuff, but do we have a better title yet? You're
saying that we should make an entire segment title entirely?
Yeah, well, you're the writer. You get to name your part of the show.
Next week. Let me think on that.
You still haven't come up with the DJ name, right? Because you're playing with that stuff. No
DJ name. I will not be doing that, but I will come up with a title by next week.
Okay. And then we'll write a theme song. People have been yelling at me I like the theme song of the line. I picked it from a royalty-free music website that Ray sent me. But, people are saying that you should write it. I told my son we're going to try to write it together. But then we could...
That'd be great.
Whatever you call this section, we'll write a
little
fun
bridge.
music for that.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, we have 4 articles here. The first, CNN talked about mortgage rates dropping for the 5th straight week.
It's good. It wasn't the drop that we'd seen the prior couple weeks, but it's still going down, and that's really good news. And I think, we're coming on a time that's usually not a super busy time as the year ends and people think about other things. But it certainly can't hurt. And you see, the real estate data that comes out, it keeps, especially on a national level, you see that pending home sales are the lowest since NAR's been measuring it for the past 20 some odd years. And new home sales fell last month, and existing home sales, are really low right now. The one thing that can change some of that in areas like here in New York City where inventory isn't that low is mortgage rates. Unfortunately, there are a large number of cities in the U.S. that have no inventory in suburban areas, and mortgage rates going down alone isn't necessarily going to change the affordability issue enough. But every little bit helps, and I think this momentum is going to continue, unfortunately, because the economy will continue to slow. On Friday, we're going to get a huge jobs report for November. That will really tell us a lot. We've seen job growth slowing down. We've seen job openings still remain kind of high, and we haven't seen a lot out of layoffs yet. But again, we talked about why that number could be a little misleading, because with so many available jobs, it's easy. It's easier than most times for people who lose their job to find another one right away. So we'll get a good read on that. But we're happy things are in the right direction,
Right.
and we're just going to enjoy it while it lasts. I mean, it's the holiday season's approaching. We're going to have something to celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, we have to feel a little merry, now that the
I don't know that anybody has ever said, Greg, you look so merry today.
You look so jovial.
It might depend on how many scotches I've had, but this is water in the mug, by the way. The crossing the line mug.
Sure. Well, we have the upcoming Fed meeting on December 12th. And good bridge to our second article, which is what Powell said about cutting rates, how that's kind of premature and how there could be hikes at.
Well, that's not the way he phrased it, though. This is like the rant of the week, right? He's like, real original, Greg. We kind of called out Janet Yellen for saying something so obvious.
Right.
Like, man, I get wet when it rains outside. It's that kind of thing. So this is what he actually said. Now, remember, what this guy says moves financial markets more than anything else.
Right.
Everybody's waiting to see what he says. He's trying to balance expectations, say, look, I know things are slowing down. We don't want to hear about rate cuts. We still might have to hike one more time. Inflation's running 3.5%. We wanted it too. Instead, he says this, and this is a direct quote.
Okay.
And try to stay awake during it. It would be premature to conclude with confidence that we have achieved a sufficiently restrictive stance or to speculate on when policy might ease. Now, you're a writer and a content editor. If I wrote that, would you be like, no, like you have to, it makes no sense. You're speaking, the financial industry people know what he means, but, he works for everybody, doesn't he?
Right. Yeah.
I just have this thing about, we talk about conciseness when we do this podcast and when I write the line and pretty much everything I write, I would never write something like it. The Fed says more than they ever did. They have these press conferences there, but it hasn't helped. They actually say stuff like this and people are like, what?
Yeah.
I would prefer the more parental answer when you asked about rates. When are you going to stop? Which is we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
Like, shut up.
Yeah.
Be quiet. Right. And we'll get there when we get there. I don't want to hear any more about when we're going to.
That did always work. It did always,
Well, a lot of times it came with a slap, but he's not allowed
My parents would never.
Okay, well.
We got there when we got there. I was in the back seat,
Well,
looking out the window.
We also got there in a far more dangerous way. There were 6 of us in a sedan.
Oh, wow.
When you had, the bench seating in the front row. You're too young to remember this, but Ray remembers that. And there were no seatbelts. And so you had 3 in the front, 3 in the back. Sometimes we had a hatchback. And, 1 or 2 of us might be in the hatchback. Real safe, right?
I feel like we should be playing the Simpsons theme.
Yeah.
It's no
seatbelts, all risk. That's all it was.
You watch, like I'll admit it, I watch reruns of Dallas all the time because I think it's the greatest show ever. But you watch anything from the 70s and the 80s.
No one ever.
And no, people forget.
Not since
It was the number 1 rated show on television for years, and the Who Shot JR episode was the number 1 watched episode for years too. It's a soap opera for sure, but it actually has good actors in it, But anyway, you watch this, and people are holding babies on their lap in the front seat, which makes them like a human airbag. It's
yeah.
So
Different time.
I guess to sum up what Jerome Powell may be trying to say, I can't tell from what he actually said, so we'll guess. Basically, they're going to need to see more evidence that the inflation is not going to change directions and start to accelerate again, or that a recession is here or imminent before they think about cutting rates. Because again, I use the antibiotic thing all the time. If you don't take all your antibiotics, that infection can come back. And if they prematurely stop raising rates or reverse course and start cutting rates, that would be potentially very dangerous. Because if inflation started to reaccelerate, which seems incredibly unlikely for sure, it would be disastrous. If you think about the situation the American consumers are in now, and if prices started to go up, then that would be bad. So work on, we have this, they call this stuff Fed speak. And you think about how many people agonized over proofing this sentence. It's probably how many people in a room for about an hour trying to make sure. And if you want to have fun, Ray, don't read a Fed announcement. They have these meetings, then they have the statement that comes out afterwards. Don't read it. But if you want to have fun and say, it's almost like a fill in the blank. It's like a Mad Libs thing.
Oh my God.
Since the last meeting, economic growth has, and then there's a blank, accelerated, stayed the same, moderated. They love the word moderated.
They do.
They love the word ease, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's sort of the rant of the week. If they gave me the job, trust me, the press conferences would be far more exciting.
I bet they would.
And of course, Hannah would be there right with me.
Right.
Because she'd be like, no, what Greg's really trying to say is this.
I'd have to take it, edit it.
Yeah, spit it back out at me,
right.
Sure. Or just trash it and say, start over again.
Well, if we want to talk about our next article, this is what I found most interesting. The term doom spending and why Americans are doing it.
Well, the whole idea of doom is used to be a video game in the 90s.
Yes.
It was fun to play. I think people still play it, but it seems like everything has become a lot more dramatic as I've gotten older, or maybe I don't think I'm more sensitive to things. My wife would say, no, you're not. But this whole idea of doom spending, which is basically spending money to cope with all the stress of what's happening
and
here.
saving a lot less.
And abroad, right? And that's the downside is you're hurting your financial well-being. It's kind of like binging on chocolate, which might give you instant gratification, but then your physical well-being. So decide which one you want to wreck first. I guess my question to you, Hannah, is why is this only a thing now? Why hasn't this been a saying like since the dawn of time? When have people not stress bought stuff to feel better, whether it's clothes or, why? Why now?
I just think that, someone at CNBC wanted a catchy title and it delivered.
No, this goes beyond CNBC.
I think people have been doom spending, like you said, forever.
Now we have to name everything.
Right.
In the old days,
it's kind of like house hacking from last week.
Yes, exactly. You just said, rent out a room in your house. Now it's house hacking.
Yeah.
Woo. It's a secret. Nobody knows about it. So that'll be a show on one of these home improvement channels, Magnolia or whatever, like next week you watch.
Yeah.
Now, people have always been stressed out. Me and Ray had hair once. I mean, it shows to show you that this stuff happens. So I guess the timing. All right. So when I'm stressed out and need to pick me up, unfortunately, I tend to buy a guitar, which is, I tend to buy cheaper ones now. What are you going to buy when you're stressed out, Hannah?
I'm heading right to Barnes & Noble, and I'm getting a lot of books.
You have heard of this place called the library, right?
I can't keep those.
That's true.
And I have a massive collection. So I read them, and the second I'm done, I head over to Barnes & Noble or my local bookstore.
Okay. Well, that is an answer we probably wouldn't hear much.
Great.
Because people would go, what's Barnes & Noble? Ray, what are you buying when you need a...
Slices of pizza.
Good one.
That's Italian. Who doesn't like pizza? French fries, McDonald's French fries, always very good way to pick me up. And of course, cookie dough ice cream will always. But again, that goes to the physical well-being is going out the window. The guitars are become a bit of a problem. But I found
How many do you have?
I think at last count it's 12. But in fairness, now that my son is learning to play, I can say I have 6. He has 6.
You have a favorite?
Well, it's.
Why are you egging him on?
And are they named? And what are the guitars named?
No, I have not named any of the guitars. The one thing I don't do, which a lot of guitarists do, is they'll buy different years of different versions of the same guitar. Like I know people that say I have 5 Strats, 3 Les Pauls. I don't do any of that. I guess my favorite is probably I have a Gibson ES 335. It's a guitar I've always wanted.
Nice.
Beautiful. My first real 6-string, which I just had fixed, is an Ibanez Roadster 2. It's almost 40 years old.
I have an Ibanez.
Ibanez makes, has always made very good, affordable guitars, as has Yamaha. I bought a Yamaha Rev Star. That was my latest purchase, and Yamaha makes motorcycles, so there's cool racing stripes on this guitar.
Nice.
I get more compliments on how it looks, and than how it plays.
That was the
But-
last time you doom bought it.
Yeah, I guess. So, you know, it is like you look at something once and Chrome's going to remember it and it's just sticking it for you to see every time. Come on, Greg, you know you're going to buy this guitar. I'm like, yeah, I am going to buy this guitar, but I have to think about how I'm going to justify it. But I have different guitars for different things. I have acoustics, I have electrics, I have an arch top, which is a full body guitar for jazz, which I don't really use all that much. But one last guitar that's very special to me is I have a Gibson SG 61 reissue. That was my first Gibson, like a guitar that I really loved over the years. So, and it's funny, my father, when I got it, is like, what's so special about a 61 SG that you need a reissue? I said, what's so special about a 57 Chevy? You know,
Good point.
there's something about for a guitar, it's the neck, it's the pickups, that make it special.
And these are the guitars you'll be using to create our theme song.
And one of these guitars I'll be playing at Il Toscano on Saturday night in
Get
Comac.
your tickets.
Well, no tickets. It's a restaurant. You can just show up.
Okay. Get your meals.
It's the food is excellent. But so all right, now that we've handled all our stress
Yes.
buying,
Now that we've done that, we could talk about the office real estate shortage, which
I know it sounds like and even the article. And I've done this sometimes when I've read a headline that didn't seem to make sense. But CoStar, who really is the source for office leasing information, is warning, and maybe that's not the best word, is saying that there could be a shortage of prime office space, what we would call Class A space.
okay.
Now, there's been doomsayers
Doom. Mhm.
that have said that as much as a third of all the office space in this country is going to disappear.
Right.
And look, that would be more likely to happen if there could be another use for that space that would be incentivized. For example, here in Manhattan, there are a lot of office buildings, older ones, that aren't going to attract tenants and can't convert to residential for a variety of reasons. Structurally, it doesn't work. There's no tax benefits to do so. It's very expensive. Back in the 90s, when I was at Rebney, there was what was called the Lower Manhattan Plan, or 421G, as we call it. That's the section of the real property tax law. And it gave an exemption and an abatement to convert old office buildings in parts of Lower Manhattan to residential. And it was an enormous success because old office buildings were, when converted to residential, had appeal to people, maybe the neighborhood and everything. And the financial district in particular, that used to be a ghost town by 5:30 or 6 o'clock, has been the fastest growing part of the city.
True.
So I here in New York, there's no desire to provide incentives for any development these days. Maybe that'll change. But the thing about Class A space is, there's a flight to quality when more becomes available and more affordable. And according to CoStar, they're saying that it's based on the current leasing and construction data compared to the history of the markets. And I've been in real estate for almost 30 years. I started at Rebney in 1995. And all that time, I can't tell you how many times people have come on TV and say commercial property is doomed. After Lehman Brothers, all these loans are going to default. Now you're hearing it now because of the high rates are all going to default. And it just keeps being counted out. And people say people are never going to want to go back to the office. And those numbers are still ticking up. Mm-hmm. They're not where we would like them to be, but they are moving in the right direction. But one of the things I've learned from history is that it does repeat itself. And after recessions or rough times like this, construction of housing and office space can stop dead in its tracks, and nothing will get built. In the 90s, we went, I don't know, 4 years almost without a new office building. It was the Condé Nast building in Times Square. And then what happens is you have this pent-up demand, and then you don't have enough space. Am I saying that's going to happen? No, but to me, that's sort of the logic here, that people would say you'd be crazy to build a new office building now. But if it's the right building with the right amenities and everything, just like on the construction of new apartment buildings or homes, if it's the right product that's in demand, one of the things people always say is we're not building the right product. I think that, unfortunately, the outdated office spaces are going to have a problem finding tenants, and something will have to be done there. So I think that's up to every location, every city and their government to figure out what can be done with that space and how to facilitate that. But, it's one of those things that sounds crazy, but when you think about it a little more, it makes a little bit of sense saying that there's not enough Class A space out there for the demand. And look, the people that are here and probably in most parts of the U.S. that are demanding their workers come back are the banks and the investment, and they have the Class A space, hedge funds, people like that. So I think there's still a demand for quality space. There always will be. The question is, will there be enough of it? I remember when I started here, someone had sent me a working paper that they were writing about how we have a shortage of housing for the rich in New York City. And at first I'm like, what? But then you realize, look at what happens, and this probably is the same thing that happens in Silicon Valley and other major cities where there's so much wealth. You realize, we're not, because as slow as things have been in housing in here and around the U.S., we've seen some unbelievably high price sales.
Right.
Like they're nothing. And it just goes to show you that some people have a lot of money, not three of us, but we're happy, right, Ray?
Not.
Yeah.
I am happy.
And you sound that's convincing.
I'm happy in life. I'm not too happy about, not being like a millionaire. But I mean, hey, maybe one day.
Well, yes. I would caution from my own experience, not that I'm not pretending to be Solomon, but I think you do realize that your biggest problems in life can't be solved by money. The health-related issues, relationship.
Very true.
Obviously, money can solve a lot of problems. It's good to know that if your car breaks down, you have enough money to repair it. And for those people living paycheck to paycheck, that's a serious concern, and that can weigh on you for sure. And then I think money's like cookie dough ice cream. One scoop is good, 2 scoops is better, 3 scoops.
Yeah.
And I think, you just want more
6
of it.
scoops and like you're a little sick, like 7 scoops, it's like maybe this is a problem. And
Well, we have a term for that in economics. It's called the theory of diminishing marginal utility. Leave it to economists. So, Ray eats, Ray's vegan, right? All right, so Ray eats 1 vegan hamburger, if there is such a thing.
Yes.
Because he's hungry. He feels very satisfied. I love it. He eats the second one. Yeah, it's pretty good too. Once you get above a certain level, he's not as satisfied with each burger because he's shoving it down his throat. So that's, there's a lesser return the more of something you buy. What?
So give Ray a break, please.
Ray loves it. Come on. Plus he's off camera. They can't be as sympathetic. If I start, talking about you eating whatever you're gorging on, then I'll be like, leave Hannah alone.
I mean,
wow.
Get a couple boos for that.
Well, thanks. At least it's more than one. All right. So does that wrap it up?
I think it does.
Well, great. I guess that's a wrap for Hannah and Ray and myself. Thank you again for supporting the show.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun doing these first 5 weeks, and please send your comments because we really are interested, and ask questions because then we have to do less show prep.
Yes. And what is that email one more time?
ctl@bhsusa.com. And please make sure you check out the other podcasts done from Studio 1873. There are a whole bunch of them.
Yeah,
you can read all about them on the bhsusa.com website. And check them out. We're going to have some cross-promotion. We're going to have our good buddy Vince Rocco in here in a couple of weeks. He's had me on his show several times, so I guess I owe it to him. Well, Vince is a great guy. But have a great week, and we will see you all on Monday, or you will hear us on Monday.
Yes.
Thanks.